Good eftermiddag. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Standard. And greetings to everyone who's watching with us online. My name is Niels Lan Doky. I am the music director here at the Standard, and also a jazz pianist and composer. And I've just written a book about improvisation and the broader applications of improvisation, the use of improvisation techniques and principles outside of the realm of music. So this is something that I'm going to be talking a little bit about today and give some examples of. Later, I'm going to be speaking first, and then later on some musicians will be joining me to illustrate some examples. And if everything goes well and our technical challenges have been solved between now and then, we will, towards the end of the session, have a link to Paris, where the main event of the International Jazz Day this year is taking place, and we will have the great legendary bassist Marcus Miller joining us to round off the discussions. So this is, today is April 30th, which is the International Jazz Day. This is something that was launched a few years ago by UNESCO, and I think Herbie Hancock was one of the main people behind the initiative. And the idea was to spread the awareness of jazz, not only jazz music, but also what the jazz means and what jazz is capable of contributing to society and to life in general. So we are collaborating with UNESCO and the Thelonious Monk Institute this year as well. We did last year also. And this year we are broadcasting this not only directly on YouTube, but also on UNESCO's website. So we're very thrilled and honored to be a part of this. And I'm about to start. So I'd like to welcome everyone, and I hope we will have a nice afternoon together. Let's see. Improvisation. I'd like to talk a little bit about my main thesis. So the idea is that life is one big improvisation. I think everyone would agree that life is spontaneous, improvised. You don't know exactly what's going to happen. You may be able to plan it to a certain extent, but you never really know exactly what's going to happen, and you never know exactly what kind of obstacles and challenges you're going to come across in life, and you react to it, and you improvise your way through life, basically. So I believe that basically everyone in this world are most people in this world are self-taught improvisers, because we don't really, in our culture, we're not really taught how to improvise. You know, we don't teach our kids about improvisation. We don't teach it in schools, and so on and so forth. So we learn it by learning by doing, basically. So essentially, we're self-taught improvisers. Now in jazz, and also I would also like to credit Indian classical music, because that's another form of music that a lot of people don't know also incorporates an enormous amount of improvisation. But basically, in jazz, I usually tell people that I estimate that the 98% of the notes heard in a jazz performance are improvised and not planned and made up on the spot. So as jazz musicians, they are not self-taught improvisers. I mean, maybe they are to a certain extent, but there are very specific techniques, tools, principles, concepts, theories, and that are very, very thorough and have been developed over generations by the great masters of improvised music, and which musicians who play jazz have to study very, very deeply in order to acquire the skill and knowledge and ability to improvise successfully. So my idea was that why not try to convert some of these techniques, or if not all of them, convert them to be able to be applied outside of the realm of music, so that potentially any type of organization, for instance, whether it be a family or school, governments, a corporation, or individuals could learn to use these techniques in their lives or in their work. And I believe it's totally possible. And I have, for the last few years, on a regular basis, received requests to do lectures and workshops for organizations, corporations, on the improvisation principles. And finally, with the help of my co-writer Heidi Westerberg, who's here with us today, we've managed to put this into a book form. So I'm very happy to have this book out today. For the time being, it's only available in Danish, but hopefully it will be in English very soon, and other languages too. But what seems to be when I've done these lectures and workshops, I think the workshops are the most interesting ones because they last the longest. I think the longest workshop I've done has lasted one full day. Today we only have like an hour and a half or something, so it's going to be like a quick overview of everything. But in a workshop situation, which ideally should last several days, but I think the longest I've done so far is just one day. In a workshop situation, we really analyze and go and study specific techniques of jazz improvisation, and we do hands-on work on how to transfer them to the work of the particular corporation or organization that is present. And the way that I've done this in the past is to bring musicians on stage, play a couple of excerpts of improvisation techniques. I interview the musicians and we discuss what has happened, how the collaboration, interaction, collective improvisation took place, and then we invite staff or employees from the corporation to come up on stage and talk about their work, and we try to draw the parallels and try to teach them how to, in front of the rest of the company as an audience, we try to teach them how to apply the jazz techniques in their work. And we also get them to explain how they did their work, and we try to translate that into a jazz situation. And we perform music that utilizes their principles. So it's a two-way communication. So it's always interesting for us as well to do these things. But basically, what seems to be what attracts the most interest from non-musicians when it comes to the art of improvisation, jazz improvisation, is the ability to be creative on command, because that's basically what jazz musicians have to do. They have to, they have a contractual engagement to do a concert at some specific time and city and a specific date, specific time, and whenever that time comes, you just have to deliver. And an audience of ticket-buying audience comes with expectations that are generally higher. The more you progress in your career, the higher the expectations are. So there's less and less room for error, so to speak. So when you arrive, you just have to be able to be creative on demand, basically. So how do you do that? You can't wait for the stars to be aligned or to just have the right feeling or whatever. You just have to be able to do it. And not only do you have to be able to do it individually, you also have to be able to do it collectively. And collectively means that when you are in a group of several musicians, or sometimes a lot of musicians together who improvise simultaneously and collectively to create one statement together, it's a really, really complex mechanism in a way. In one way it's simple, but in another way it's complex. But that particular phenomenon, that is possible to do a whole concert of several hours of spontaneous improvisation and make it work, seems to be a mystery to a lot of people, and something that fascinates people who are not musicians. And we will, later on today, we will be giving you a demonstration when the musicians that I have invited will join me for some of this. But basically, the way jazz works has been called, some people have called it a perfect example of democracy in action. Because the way the music works is that there is room for everyone involved to be able to express their unique personality and contribute their unique contribution, but at the same time, everyone is involved in the responsibility to maintain, nurture, and make the collective improvisation roll forward. And this is really, when you think about it, it's really what democracy is about. So therefore, there seems to be a growing awareness of the fact that jazz has some knowledge or some wisdom embedded in that could be of benefit to a lot of other people outside of the music world. And I think this is one of these are some of the reasons why the United Nations have decided to have an International Jazz Day. And this is, I forget exactly how many years it's been going on, but it's just a few years. And I'd like to just read you a couple of statements from them that illustrate their motivation for doing this. Well, first of all, before I get to the UNESCO themselves, I'd like to just give two examples about statements that have been said about comparing jazz to democracy. There's a statement here from Susan Rice, the US National Security Advisor, who says, like democracy itself, jazz has a structure, but within it you can say almost everything, or anything. And then Ken Burns has said, jazz is a spectacularly accurate model of democracy and a kind of look into our redemptive future possibilities. So I tend to agree with these kinds of, I mean, they're really big statements, but I think there is a tremendous amount of truth in it, and so my hope with the book Improvisation and with this lectures and seminars such as this one is to try to generate awareness and open up people's minds to the idea that all kinds of organizations, to the very small ones to the big ones, and from families and private structures to corporations or government or whatever, could be operated and in a way that incorporates jazz principles. So one of the key components in, I'll try to cover as many of the most essential elements as possible, but of course it's not possible to cover them all today, but I'll try to get to as many of the essentials as possible. So I'll do them kind of in a spontaneous order. So the order in which I do them is not necessarily the order of importance, but one that comes to mind right now is the fact that jazz has the ability to have the coexistence of discipline and freedom. That's one, to me, that's one of the key components. On one hand, very disciplined because, like tonight here at the Standard, there's a group arriving who's going to do a concert at 6 o'clock. It's going to start at 6 o'clock, I can guarantee you, or maybe 5-10 minutes after. But they are going to start, and it's a very precise program that they're doing. But within this program, there's so much room for spontaneity that every night they surprise us. I mean, there's magical moments of unexpected beauty that arises every night, and it is because of this very, very special balance between strict discipline and complete freedom. I mean, in an extreme case, there's so. I think in jazz history there was a period where a specific genre of jazz emerged that was referred to as free jazz, and that was a form of jazz that didn't really have much of a structure. Actually, the structure was that there wasn't any structure. So, and that was in my mind that genre didn't last for very long because I think people, and it didn't have much impact because people, not only the listeners but also the musicians who played it, lost interest relatively quickly. And I think the reason is that restrictions and boundaries are a natural part of creativity. That is what stimulates our creativity, to think about how to overcome obstacles. That a way to kickstart creative thinking. And in this context, I'd like to mention a quote from Charles Darwin, who said something very interesting. He said, "In the long history of humankind, and animal kind too, those who learn to collaborate and improvise most effectively have prevailed." So even Charles Darwin is a advocate for jazz in a way. So in music, what we tend to do is to in jazz, what we tend to do is we tend to create frameworks or obstacles or challenges or something that we give musicians to overcome, and we'll demonstrate this later on when musicians come, because I have some of the musicians who are coming today have not played this music at all before. In fact, the group that's going to play together has not played together before ever. That's part. I deliberately wanted to do that in order to demonstrate the spontaneous and improvisation elements. But one of the things that's going to happen is that I brought some music, and where I have composed a song. This is a song I have composed, and it's just one sheet that I'm going to give them that's going to turn into 5 minutes of music. And I have defined some harmonies, what we call harmonies in music, a series of chords and chord progressions that the musicians have to improvise over. So basically, to explain it in non-musicians' terms, is that what we do is I basically will hand this piece of music to the musicians, and I can reveal this now because they're not here yet. They're arriving. I have a watch here, yeah, and at least another 25 minutes. But um, they are going to. I'm going to tell him to show them the chords on this sheet, and as trained musicians, they know whenever they see each a chord, they know which notes work with these chords and which notes don't work. So basically, the challenge it essentially is for them to be able to play a series of consecutive notes that match these harmonies, that can float on top of them, and to make melodic sense and musical sense at the same time. And this can be sometimes very challenging if the chord progressions are complex or very condensed or very unusual or surprising, or the various degrees of unfamiliarity that you can throw into such a challenge. When a composer such as myself, or anyone else in jazz for that matter, gives a sheet of music like this to a musician, we're basically imposing a framework that's fixed and defined. So, but within this framework, they can do whatever they want. They can do whatever they want, and so this is what some of these people from these quotes I was quoting before were saying, that it has a structure, but within the structure you can say almost anything. But you do have to, in addition to your individuality and expressing yourself individually, you also have to at all times nurture and support the collective improvisation, because everything is improvised. You don't know what the other musicians are going to play in the next split second. You have to be very, very alert and listen to them and react to them, respond to them, and in order to maintain the collective improvisation. And when you're let's say you're later on we're going to be 4 people doing this. You can imagine if one of us loses the grip for 1 split second, everything can very easily, fall apart. So it's very crucial and essential to be able to do this collectively. And if we're getting back to the parallel between democracy and jazz, I would say a good reason why jazz is it has been called a perfect example of democracy in action, is because the way the music is set up. It's set up in such a way that the moment something is not done according to the rules, you can feel it right away. Whereas in a democratic society, for instance, you may not feel the effect right away. You may feel that, let's say, a government puts out a new law, a legislation that has a good intention, perhaps, but after 6 months or a year and a half, you realize that the intention, it didn't live up to the intention. In fact, it had a completely opposite effect, and they did more harm than good. So there you are, 18 months later, going, oh, okay, let's come up with a new law. In jazz, it doesn't work that way, because in jazz, if you break the law or come up with a law, metaphorically speaking, that doesn't work, the music sinks instantly. So that's why I think jazz musicians are trained and learn to respond very, very quickly. Just to give you an example, I'd like to give you an example this is a lesson I learned very early on in life. I had when I was about 15 years old, I had the very amazing opportunity to perform with the great Thad Jones, who lived here in Copenhagen while I was growing up. And when I had this opportunity to play with him, I was very nervous on one hand at first, but I was also very eager to meet, because this was the first time I met a master, a really, really great master of jazz and master of improvised music. So I wanted to ask him questions. I wanted him to teach me something. I wanted to learn as much as I could, because I didn't know when the next time I would get to meet such a master again. So I was eager to soak up as much knowledge as I could during the short time that I was in his presence, which at that time was just one gig. I didn't know how many times it would happen again. But anyway, at first he didn't really want to bother. He was like, "Oh, let's just play." But then finally, he told me something in the break between the first and second part of the concert. He told me, "Let me tell you something." He pulled me aside, and he told me, "When you play, try this. Try to not listen to yourself at all, at any time, even when you're the soloist, when you're the feature, when you have the moment in the music where you have the spotlight. You don't listen to yourself. You listen to the other musicians you're playing with at all times. Just do it and see what happens." He didn't explain why. So I was ready to say, obey anything he would ask me at that time. So I tried it, and I felt immediately that the music rose to a whole nother level. I mean, explosively, just went to no comparison. And I also remember feeling, oh wow, this is amazing. And then I remember slipping back into my old habit of concentrating on myself when I was soloing, and I felt the music dropping down immediately. So this is basically what happens in jazz when you lose grip of the moment. Basically, I'm going to talk about this shortly. But when you slip out of that moment, the music just drops instantly. So you have to learn how to keep that momentum up there in order for the music to be sustainable. And I think this happens ultra fast compared to how the same mechanisms happens out in society. So I think if society can adapt this way of operating, it could potentially lead to dramatic changes, I think. But being in the moment, I'd like to talk a little bit about that, because I think most people know this feeling that when some people call it in a state of flow, or you lose the sense of time. You're with somebody or doing something great, and you feel like 5 minutes have passed by, and all of a sudden you realize that 8 hours went by. I think everybody has experienced that at some point in their lives. This experience happens constantly in jazz. You have to create that state, otherwise the music doesn't lift off. So how do you do that? So being in the moment means that you are completely present. Now, what does that mean? That means that you let go of the past and you let go of the future. And in music, what that means is that letting go of the past is when you're playing, you can't be sitting and thinking, "Oh, this note I just played was a terrible note. I'm gonna play a better note next. I'm gonna play a better note." Or in the future, you can be thinking, "Oh, in a moment, I'm gonna play the best group of notes I can think of, and I will really impress people. They will love it." That's the future. And when you have those kinds of thoughts, the feeling in the music just drops like completely. like, and the moment you slip back into the being in the moment, it's like an airplane, just with tailwind, you're back up flying. It's a strange phenomenon, but it is what it is. So therefore, as jazz musicians, we always try to slip back into that zone if we slip out of it. Hopefully, the best musicians are the ones that are able to stay in there constantly. Just enter when they play the first note of a concert, and they never leave that room. They just are there nonstop till the end. And I'd like to just say something about the concept of the moment, the being in the now. Or, what is that really? I was thinking about it one day, and I thought to myself, what does the present really mean? Where does the past end? Where does the present begin? Where does the present end, and where does the future begin? So, in other words, where's the beginning of the present, and where does it end? And the more I thought about that, the more I realized that it's really up to yourself how you just define it. Because, could it be the present? Could be we can call it a radius of 1 minute, 30 seconds, 1 minute, an hour, an hour ago up until now, and an hour from now. Is that now? Or is it just 5 minutes ago, now, and then up to 5 minutes from now? But you could also say, is it a year from now, and a year ago? Is that all of that now? And really what I've worked consciously on adapting in my life for the past few years is to adapt an attitude where I consider all of life as one big present moment. Where everything really is happening at the same time, or there is no time, or I don't know how you want to explain it, but you know what I mean? Everything is one big present moment, and you can when you start thinking like that, and really when you integrate it and adapt it into your way of living, into your way of thinking, I've found that it becomes real. I mean, in the sense that when people come up to you and say, "Oh, I haven't seen you in so many years. How have you been?" And, "Oh, your kids have become so big," and, "Oh, you've got more gray hair than last time I saw you," and or whatever you can think of. Those kinds of feelings, I don't get those anymore at all. Whenever I meet anyone, whether it's been one day or 20 years, it feels like yesterday, always. And I started feeling that way long time ago with musicians, because what would happen in jazz, we have a lot of situations where musicians are put together for one gig, and then they part, and then they're playing with other groups of musicians, and jazz musicians then generally play with a lot of different musicians at different times. So you're often in a situation where you play with someone, you have a great experience, and then you don't see them for years. And then when you see them again, it feels like no time has gone by, because you had that experience together. You were in the moment together, and had that experience where everyone was collaborating, improvising, and nurturing the collective process successfully, while at the same time expressing their individuality. And when you do that, it's like everything falls into place. It's like the music starts to play on its own, completely effortlessly. I don't know why, but you'll hear many musicians talk about this similar experience. They feel like the music just plays on its own. You're just the effort is removed. You just allow the music to happen. And I think it has a lot to do with this time issue, letting go of the past and of the future. So that was a little bit about being in the moment. Let me just see. I got a letter from Herbie Hancock and the organization behind the International Jazz Day yesterday, and they were talking about today's day, which is happening all over the world. There's jazz events and jazz-related events all over the world this day, and they wrote this in their letter. We live in a world of increasingly complex problems. On April 30th, the world will show once again that jazz is a natural part of a sustainable solution. Jazz is more than just a musical art form. It's an affirmation of our ability to peacefully collaborate and cooperate in spite of profound differences, to speak with our unique individual voices while still respecting and celebrating the collective. Now, this is another thing that's very unique about jazz, is that you can take musicians from any part of the world that they don't even speak the same language, can't communicate, maybe, but you can put them together on a stage and make them improvise, and they can create a successful improvisation because of these principles that are built into the form of music called jazz. So this is something really great too. I just want to go back to the an analogy with democracy. I'd like to mention talk a little bit about the quintet that Miles Davis led in the 1960s. Many people consider this one of his best groups and most fruitful artistic period. So the quintet that he had was himself on trumpets, Wayne Shorter on tenor saxophone, Herbie Hancock on piano, Ron Carter on bass, and Tony Williams on drums. Now here you have a group where each individual member was a very, very unique and very, very strong personality. The way the music was structured was as such that each individual had all the space in the world to express their full individuality. There was no restriction. There was no, when you heard their music, you could really hear Herbie Hancock, you could really hear Wayne Shorter, you could really hear Tony, Ron. I mean, it was really a platform for complete individual expression and freedom. At the same time, the collective output, the collective sound, the collective group effort was extremely, how should we say, it was like really a tight ship. I mean, they really, really were like an organism that, it's almost like one living creature, basically. I mean, you would think that they thought had complete ESP. I mean, the way they could just improvise. A lot of their concerts they would do concerts where they play maybe, let's say, they play 8 to 10 tunes, and they would never count them off. They would never stop and say, okay, let's start this next. They would just like segue into one to the next tune, just like an organic, without any talking or thinking. Really, really amazing improvisation. But in this particular group, Miles Davis was the official leader. But when you analyze what really happens in the music, most of the time he wasn't playing, because there's 5 individuals that had equal amount of room to express themselves. So obviously there wasn't room for the leader to be in the spotlight the whole time, like you would normally expect of a group leader, like you would in a situation of a let's say a Michael Jackson concert. You know, he would be on the spotlight 99% of the time at least. You know, here, not the case. So his function was to lead without leading in a way. I mean, he often described himself as a catalyst. Now he gathered 4 musicians beside himself with incredible knowledge, incredible experience, incredible personalities, incredible creative skills, and he put them together. Already the act of putting them together, choosing them, and choosing the right balance of personality, that's a creative act in itself. But he put them together and then acted. He calls himself a catalyst. He would be a catalyst once in a while, stepping in, saying something or steering a little bit here and there to allow them to unfold the best of their abilities individually and together. And this, to me, is a very, very a great example of democracy, where a leader can really lead without taking up all the space, and lead by allowing all the individuals to express themselves, and they actually thrive on the strengths of the individuals to generate their leadership. So really, when you hear Miles Davis's music, you don't hear a trumpet. You hear a trumpet, of course, but you hear much more. You hear a sound, a cohesive group. You hear a dialogue, a communication, stories being told in a way that would not be possible without the contributions of all the individual members of the group. So this is something I think is interesting to see in other contexts outside of music. In fact, my business partner here at the Standard, Klaus Meyer, is he's not a musician, but I think of him as a musician. And when we first met each other, one of the things he told me was that, Niels, I think I know how it feels to play jazz with you, because the way we interact when we exchange thoughts, I'm beginning to understand now how jazz happens when you play it. And I consider him a jazz musician, even though he doesn't play in an instrument. But what he does is, he's a very passionate man about his work, and what he likes to do is to associate himself with very skilled and very passionate people to do projects. He never does a project on his own. Just like Miles Davis would never do a group of just solo trumpet, an album of solo trumpet. You choose people who are very good at what they do and are very passionate about what they do, and they do something that's different than anyone else. So just by associating yourself with them, you end up doing something that's unique. And the passion, knowledge, skill, and energy of these collaborators become the driving force, the main driving force of the operation. So this way, you can actually do a lot more than you could if you had to be in the spotlight the whole time. So for instance, Miles Davis, he can do a whole concert of 2 hours, and maybe effectively trumpet playing would maybe make up, I would say, maybe 20 minutes. The rest of the time, the rest of the group will be doing the rest of the work. In Klaus's case, he's got, I think he's got it's been a while since I got the update, but the last count I heard was 87 different businesses, restaurants, bakeries, jazz club, So the only way that's possible, he's not able to be in 87 places at the same time. So the only way it's possible is because there are in each of these units, each of these operations, there are people with special skill and great passion for what they do. And if you can steer that, be a catalyst in a way. Initially, you're a catalyst, and then once in a while, when a statement is needed to shift the gear or to add a new component to the discussion or whatever, then you're there to do that. But you don't have to be there the whole time. It's the collective community that really makes it happen, and it's the same thing in any kind of organization. If you're an organization where the leader takes up all the space, I don't believe you can get very far. I think you get very far when you gather people with something great to contribute, and then you allow them, give them space to contribute. So this is what one of the foundations of jazz. So as you see, I'm just checking the time. I think the musicians are showing up soon, but let me see. Yeah, I think some of the values that are embodied in jazz and some of the values that are necessary or essential to make jazz happen at all in the first place are values that are universal and which I think are becoming more and more important in today's society. It's values such as presence, being in the moment, immersion, authenticity, creativity, intuition, integrity, democracy, cooperation, and dialogue. Now, dialogue, I'd like to talk a little bit about dialogue also and use it as a platform to describe and talk a little bit about what improvisation is. Now, there's this proverb, you might have heard it, every conversation is a form of jazz. That's and I like that a lot because it really is a very simple and precise way to explain how jazz is played. It's like having a round table conversation with 3 other people, for instance. Somebody says something, one of the others respond to it, and then somebody else follows up and responds to that, and it just becomes a spontaneous, interactive dialogue, and that's exactly how jazz is played. And there's a framework, of course, just like a discussion, a dialogue, verbal dialogue. You can get together and decide, okay, let's meet to talk about what we're going to do for our next summer vacation. Call together the whole family. Let's talk about what we're going to do for the next summer vacation. Then everybody chips in. There's interactive dialogues, collateral dialogues, or whatever. And it's the exact same way. You have an agenda, and you have a desired outcome of some kind, but you don't know exactly what's going to happen during the event, and you don't know exactly what the exact outcome is going to be. It's the same way with a jazz concert. You know what time it starts, what the date is, who the players are. You don't know exactly what they're going to play, and you don't know exactly how it's going to end, but you do know it's going to end approximately at a few hours later after it ended. That's all you know, and that's good enough. And I'd also like to emphasize the notion that music, in my opinion, is a language. Jazz in particular, it's a language. It's not the art form itself. The art form is when you have a language, you can master a language, but it's the same way as mastering French. If you study French or a language, you master the grammar, the vocabulary, and so on and so forth. That's one form of mastery, but to me that's more similar to sports, where you can run 100 meters within a certain time span or whatever. To me, music is about telling a story. So the music itself, the note you play on your instrument, the vocabulary, that's the language, and that's not the essence. The essence is the story you tell with the language, and for that reason, when you have a conversation between people, whether it's a verbal conversation or a musical conversation between musicians, in order for the conversation to be fruitful and for the participants to feel that they are nurtured by it or it's fulfilling, you have to have dialogue partners that you feel contribute or nurture the collective process. In music, whenever I do master classes at conservatories, I'd always tell the students it's important to learn your instrument, practice your instrument, master your instrument, learn all the musical vocabulary you have to learn and all the rules and all. But at the end of the day, it's equally as important to live an interesting life, because if you don't have an interesting life, you don't have any interesting stories to tell. So you're not going to attract interesting people to talk to, or play with if it's music. So in a broader context outside of music, I think in an improvising context, whether it's in a company or an organization or of any kind, I think it's the same holds true. If you want to have a really fruitful and fulfilling dialogue, which an improvisation essentially is, you have to surround yourself with interesting people who are skilled, knowledgeable at the particular topics that you want to approach in this improvisation or discussion, and who also supplement each other in a relevant way. Like, you don't want to have, in certain contexts, you may not want to have 5 people who have the same experience and have the same opinions and have pretty much the same to contribute. You may have different contrasts to create a 1 + 1 = 3 effect. If you have too many people, like the proverb about relationships. If you're with somebody if 2 people in a relationship are the same, have the same opinions, agree on everything, then one of them is obsolete. That's I think it's the same thing in a musical group, and also in any kind of organization, in a workplace or in society. You have to have these different contributions from different people to create something that's larger than the sum of the individual parts. And I think in music, people like Miles Davis, I keep mentioning him because I think he's really the quintessential jazz musician, has really succeeded to do this. I think improvisation is or the various parts of that improvisation involves, which is communication, being able to be reactive, quickly, and intuition, and various tools we use. It's like a muscle. You train it like a muscle. It's like going to the gym. The more you go the more you run, the stronger your legs become, the better you run. And the same thing in improvisation. So I would recommend that, I basically think that everybody can benefit from increasing their ability to improvise. So I would encourage everyone to consciously practice their ability to improvise, and by part of it involves letting go of the past and letting go of the future, and letting go of the fear of making mistakes, and letting go of the fear of the unknown. Because the more you do it, the better you become at it. And in jazz, I think I'm going to show you a little example in a moment. In jazz, we have this idea that there aren't any real mistakes in the literal sense of the word. You know, if we exit, you know, when we improvise and in the heat of the action, if we hit a wrong note, a so-called wrong note, there's always a way out of it, meaning by the way you choose your subsequent notes, you can make that wrong note right in retrospect. I can just give you a quick example of what that is. Like let me say, I'm going to play a chord now. This is a C minor chord. I'm going to play a note now that to most ears is going to sound wrong, and that is the major third. We call it. It's an E. Sounds like this. You know, to most ears that sounds wrong, right? Now, what if I'm improvising? Accidentally, I hit that E. What am I going to do? I'm going to stop the concert and say, apologize to the audience. I'm really sorry. I messed up. The improvisation is a fiasco. I'm going to give you all your money back, and we're going to all go home. But, we can't do that, right? So I could do something like this. You know, when I land on the E. Here I even played 3 E's, and I played something that not only made the E not sound wrong, it made the E become essential in the phrase. I turned it around, made the E note. If what I just played, if we took the E out of that, it wouldn't make sense. So all of a sudden the E becomes crucial and essential in this phrase. So this is, I think, a very interesting concept in life. You know, whenever a wrong note happens, you can practice trying to think, what can you do subsequently to make that note right in retrospect? And I think a lot of us most people have experienced, without doing it consciously, they have experienced situations where they have a so-called they call it a blessing in disguise. You know, something terrible happens to them, and they're like, like a guy. You hear about a guy. He goes bankrupt. His company goes down, and he's completely humiliated. Nobody in his business wants to work with him, and he's like has to start all over from scratch and do something completely different. And eventually, he emerges in a completely different field and become way more successful. And he realizes what he did was far closer to what his true self. This is, so in retrospect, it was a blessing in disguise that I went bankrupt, so I could find my real success and real niche over here. So that's one way of looking at it. But you can also do it consciously. You can say when something unwanted, so-called unwanted, a wrong note happens in life, you can say, instead of waiting and see, maybe it'll turn out to be a blessing in disguise, maybe it won't. And I'll just cry the blues for another few years. You can right away choose to say, okay, how do I make this wrong note right? What notes do I have to play after that will make this wrong note right? And of course, you can do learning by doing. Just try your way, trial and error. Oh, no, that didn't work. Okay, I'll try something else. That didn't work either. Oh, I'll try something else. Oh, that worked. but in jazz, we have things we know already work and things we don't work. Like, for instance, what I just did just now, I can't remember exactly because it was improvised, but I think I did some what we call chromatic resolutions. This is a specific technique that, from trial and error in past generations, we have found out that this works. This is one thing that works. So therefore, when this situation occurs, this is one of the options that we have available to us to make that note meaningful. And in life, this has not been taught and studied. But I believe you can't do that if you, on the same level as music improvisation has been studied and logged, you can do it in life too. But people just haven't gotten around to do it yet. And it's the same thing as, when I was growing up here in Denmark in the late 60s and 70s, I remember in school, while I was in school, in grade school, the politicians were on TV eagerly debating whether they should start teaching sexual science in schools, to teach kids how, the flowers and the bees and all that stuff, how reproduction works. They were debating that intensively, and some people thought, no, we can't teach children that. Others thought, yes, we have. It was a big debate at some point. I didn't follow it too closely, but anyway, I just remember it was an issue. And the reason why I'm bringing up that example is because it's sex or reproduction or whatever you want to call it in this concept is self-taught for most people. I mean, if not all people, the vast majority of people are self-taught in this area. You just learn by doing. But I've heard people say that there's a lot of things you could teach in school that you don't, and society could look different if you did teach. And for instance, relationship. When I moved to Paris in the early 90s, I remember France was one of the countries in the world that had the lowest rate of divorce. Scandinavian countries were pretty high at the time already, but in France it was still, maybe it's Catholic country and with family values are different or whatever. But anyway, it was I think it was one out of 3 marriages did not last at that time. Now it's 2 out of 3. So somebody came up with the notion, why don't we teach in school to kids how to interact with people of the opposite sex, because I have a friend of mine in France, actually. He's about 50 years old. He's been having marital problems for years, and finally he came to me and said one day, Niels, you know what, I realized something about women. I said, yes, Pierre, what's that? They're not like us. I mean, somebody could have told him that, in grade school. Maybe it saved him the trouble of, all those years of exploring. Same thing with improvisation. I think, there's improvisation techniques that can be basic things that can be taught. Just like the one thing about the error. If you make a wrong note, in jazz we really don't think about wrong notes. It's an expression that's I can't remember ever hearing it, or if I've heard it, it's been decades. Maybe you always find a way to move forward, so it's not an issue. And getting back to Miles Davis, he used to say there are no mistakes. So I'd also like to just talk a little bit about the fear of the unknown, because it's linked to the fear of making mistakes. If there are no mistakes, if you accept, if you integrate that that notion, then you detach yourself from the fear of the unknown. And with the fear of the unknown, you open up like a really very vast realm of possibilities. Because a lot of people play it safe, they want to limit themselves to decisions and plans and ways of thinking that are safe, predictable to a certain extent, safe basically. But if you don't have that, let go of the need to be safe. I mean, imagine the amount of possibilities, creatively and otherwise, that open up. And the letting go of the need to be safe is linked to the ability to trust that whatever's going to happen is going to be okay. And as an improviser, and the better you become at it, you more and more start to realize that there is always a way onwards to the next note, always. And once you realize that to a certain extent in music, and if you try to apply it in life, you realize that's the same. The case is exactly the same. So let me just see. I think I see the musicians have arrived. Do we have a bass player? Okay. We everyone's here. Thank you. Let me just see if I maybe I'd just like to find at the end just to talk a little bit about a couple of wrong notes in life. Like the people have been talking about the financial crisis. Oh, it's so terrible. So terrible. A lot of people complain about it. But I have to say, in music, a lot of record companies complain about it greatly. But I have to say, overall, looking in the broader picture, it's the best thing that's ever happened to music in many, many years. Because in not so many years ago, the market was completely saturated with way too much music that had no reason to be there in the first place, because the way the technology had evolved was such that it had become extremely inexpensive and very easy to produce records. So basically everyone was producing their records, even on a student level. They barely graduated from conservatory. They already have their own record. And the market was just so saturated with music that it was hard for the consumer really to find the good albums among all this gray mass of random stuff. Now, with the financial crisis, the vast majority of all those people that put out all these, I would call them irrelevant records, they vanished. And the only people who are back are left are the people that really, really mean it very seriously and work very, very seriously with what they do. And I think what has happened is that the quantity is lower than it's been in many, many, many years, but the quality is way higher than it's been in many, many years. So to me, that's a fantastic way of seeing a wrong note become a right one. And you can mention many, many different other examples like this, but I'm just gonna take a quick look at my list here to see if I didn't forget anything essential I wanted to say, and then we'll bring up the musicians. So I think I'm just going to say a few final words about improvisation. So improvisation essentially is the ability to adapt to change. Because in an improvisational context, everything is changing all the time. Because when we're going to get together here in a moment with the musicians, nobody, not even themselves, know what they're going to play next. So everyone has to listen to each other the whole time to see what they're going to play. And there's going to be constant change, because when, let's say, the bassist is playing one note, the next second he's going to play another note. So the rest of us have to react to that note and adapt to it and play something that fits that note. And then when we're playing, he's going to adapt again and choose his note to fit what we're playing. So it's a constant game of adapting to change. And a very a key factor in it, some people call it intuition. I think you can talk about intuition, but you can also talk about association. I think those are closely linked, and the border between them is a bit blurred. But association is the same principle used in math. For instance, if you have an equation, you're faced with a math equation that you have to solve. How do you solve a math equation? Let's say the particular math equation that you're faced with is of a kind where there are, let's say, 500 different formulas that you can potentially try on this, and one of them will probably work. So what are you going to do? You're going to try each one of these 500 until you find the right one that works. That's going to be a bit time consuming. So the way math works is that you see an equation, and then you intuitively or instinctively, or whatever you want to call it, you feel, oh, it's probably one of these 3, 4, 5 formulas that will work. So you may try one of them, two of them, then you have it. It's the same way in music. You can't, out of all the notes, or in playing chess for that matter, out of all of the moves you can make from one move to the next, you can't sit down and calculate all the potential implications of each move before you decide which move to take. You have to follow your instinct, your intuition, say, okay, I'm going to move here. It's the same thing in improvisation. And the intuition is a very important factor that we use. And some people may think that intuition is like a bit esoteric and so on. And maybe it is, but I think a lot of those types of phenomenons are esoteric in one period, and a few years later they become just objective scientific facts, like let's say cell phones. If you try to explain them to somebody in the 15th century, that one day we're going to be able to, with a little piece of plastic, communicate with people on the other side of the globe in real time, they wouldn't believe it. But now it's a fact. We know from the science that how cell phones work, and I think intuition is part of the same thing. Some musicians have realized that if they set up closely, physically closely, as opposed to far apart on stage, the communication, intuitive, wordless communication seems to flow better. So there's discoveries now that the electromagnetic fields from our bodies, when they overlap each other, we have a better way to communicate. And so intuition might not be as esoteric of a concept as one would think. But anyway, I think this concludes for what we can cover for now. So now I'd like to bring up some musicians and do a few examples of improvisation for you. So I'd like to bring up one by one. First of all, I'd like to bring up on drums. He is one of Denmark's finest musicians. He is one of the most demanded and respected drummers in this part of the world, and he is a former member of the Danish radio big band, and also a former member of the Niels Henning Ørsted Petersen trio, a group with which he toured around the world for a number of years in many different countries. Please welcome on drums, Jonas Johansen. And joining us on bass is a fantastic bass player from Toronto, Canada, who is performing here at the Standard at the moment. So he agreed to come in a little early today and join us. So we're very grateful to have him. Please welcome Greg Earl on bass. And we have decided here at the Standard, one of the things we work a lot with is to develop new talent. So once in a while we focus on projects that involve very, very prominent young new talent. So on this particular occasion today, we've decided to invite such a player, and this is a young alto saxophone player who is a member of the Katrine Windfeldt big band that plays here on Monday nights, or has been playing here on Monday nights for the past many months. And so we'd like to invite him to join us. Please welcome on alto saxophone, Søren Høst. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is, as I told Søren when he showed up for sound check, we're going to play something that I'm not going to tell him in advance what it is, because it has to be authentic improvisation. So I will pull out some music now, which let's see, is this it? Yes. Yes. Okay. So this is a little piece of music I wrote. Very simple. See, it's barely 1 page long, but this is going to serve as a platform for several minutes of improvisation. And you have never played this before. Actually, we did this similar experiment for the BBC a couple of days ago with these two guys, and we played this tune. So at that time, it was your first time playing it. So you have played it before, but you will play it differently now, of course. Yeah, you don't remember it. Okay, good. But anyway, Søren has never played it before. You don't even know what it is. So here it is. The reason why I pulled out this particular composition is because it gets to the improvisation very fast. You know, usually you have, when you write a song, you write the melody, then we all play the melody, and then we start the improvisation. But here, there's built-in improvisation right from the beginning. So basically, so let me show it to you, Søren. So see here, this is a riff, the main riff right here. And then there's a gap. See, this riff is repeated here, and then there's a gap right away every fourth bar. So there's a gap. Now in this gap, you all take turns improvising. So you fill out the blanks. So you just, you can look at each other, decide who filled, but basically you fill out here the gaps, and then when you reach these bars here, you lay out. I'll play this part right here.
Okay, but I play this part.
Yeah.
Is it a return to Denmark?
Yeah, it is. And if you don't, you could wait. Let me play the first one so you can hear approximately what they feel, and then you can join in on the next one, right? Mm. But then, from the very beginning, fill in here with improvised fills, and then once we'll play this twice through this structure twice, and then once we're done doing that, we will segue into a blues in F, which is a familiar structure for all jazz musicians. It's a standard structure, so the chord changes. So we'll improvise from there. So and then at the very end, we'll play this again, and I will repeat the last part of it twice, and then we'll end with one of these riffs up here. So you'll hear it. Just watch us, follow us. Okay? You
I had one.
you had one. Oh. Would you like one?
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yes.
The composition is called Return to Denmark. He's not improvising, he's tuning his bass. Right? Are you ready? Yes? Okay. I'll just start. You just come in. Thank you so much. Jonas Johansen on drums, Greg Earl on bass, and Søren Høst on alto saxophone. By the way, Søren is going to appear here on our next broadcast, which is during the Copenhagen Jazz Festival on July 7th. He's going to be performing with a young Danish drummer, Niklas Bardeleben, who has been appearing on several of these broadcasts of ours that we call the New Legacy concerts. So Niklas has gathered a group of great musicians, including two young musicians, Søren Høst on alto and Mathias Petri on the bass, and they're going to be joined by the UK trumpeter Gerard Presenter, who most people know from the group Us Three, the big hit they had, Cancer Loop. He's the one that played the trumpet solo on that. So Gerard, Søren, Mathias, and Niklas Bardeleben, July 7th at 10:30 p.m. Danish time. So. Just checking if did we manage to get the live link up from Paris? It looks like we did. We have the International Jazz Day main event this year is in Paris, France. Last year it was in Osaka. We had a link there to this. This year it's in Paris, we have the great and legendary bassist Marcus Miller, who is appearing in Paris. He is scheduled to join us here at 4:45. 3-4 minutes late. Okay, we can do that. I'd like to ask Søren. So this is the first time you played this song. How do you approach? What do you do when you play something with musicians you haven't played with before, and a piece of music you haven't played with before? How do you do it?
I try to have an open mind and not. I try to just have no thoughts and just have a white screen in my head, so I can. So I'm able to interact and how do you say it? Absorb and communicate.
Very good. I thought you did so very well. What do you think, Greg?
Yeah, I mean, I'm usually looking for kind of a touchstone, something that is already within my experience that I can draw on, something that's maybe, I mean, not an identical song, but something similar that I've done before, and see how I can use those things to get through the task at hand.
You found it easy to communicate with Søren?
Yeah, that was pretty easy. His back was turned, so that's of course always the thing. But it was kind of Jonas was directing traffic in the melody and letting us know who should go. So that was good.
Jonas, by the way, is aside from being a fantastic drummer, he's also a professor at the Jazz Conservatory here. So how do you think Søren did?
Very fine. It was very fine. I liked it.
So how do you teach these things at the concert? Do you teach musicians about communication, and how do you do that?
That's a very long story. We we talk a lot about it. We do it. Simply play music, and we discuss the importance of talking together. But of course, there's also a big issue in learning or knowing language, a language you are speaking with, knowing tradition, talking about history, talking about the context of the music you play, where does it place itself in the world of music, and all that kinds of stuff.
All right. Well, let's see how are they doing in Paris. Jens, will we get audio from Paris once they're ready? Okay. Yeah. So we will be able to hear Marcus speak also. Okay. 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 All right. We could play one more. Can we? Yes?
Well, a short one.
Yeah, short one. Okay. Shall we? You feel like trying this? Yeah? Yet another one he's never played before. I sent it to him last night to take a peek of it, but when he showed up, he said, no, he had not checked his emails. So basically, I will play the melody once through. Rubato, I'll start by myself. Here, and here, I've scratched out the first part. And then I'll gradually get into tempo, and by the time I'm done at the end of the structure, we'll be in full tempo, and then when we're at the top, you can improvise on these changes, okay?
Okay.
Shall we see how it goes? Thank you so much. Once again, Jonas Johansen, Greg Earl, and Søren Høst. Thank you. And now we have Marcus Miller with us from Paris. Hi, Marcus.
How's it going, guys?
Oh, we can't hear you.
Hello, testing 1, 2, 3.
Jens, can you give us some sound?
Testing 1, 2, 3. Marcus Miller on the microphone. Check 1, 2. Hello, testing 1, 2, 3. Marcus on the mic. Check 1, 2. Check it 1, 2.
Sorry, we can't hear you, Marcus, but the engineer is running down to the truck to send some audio through. I don't know if you can hear us. Can you hear us?
Okay. Marcus checking 1, 2. Marcus checking the microphone. Check 1, 2. Marcus Miller.
Marcus, have you by chance muted your sound on your computer?
Marcus checking 1, 2. Microphone check 1, 2. Check it 1, 2.
No
Check
sound
1,
coming.
2. Okay.
Oh, they can't hear him in the truck downstairs. Okay, so there is audio coming in. We're just not getting
Okay.
it up here.
Who's struggling? Check 1, 2. Check it 1, 2. Marcus checking 1, 2.
Yeah.
Check it 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2. Check it 1, 2, 3. Marcus checking the microphone.
We have you with us, Marcus. Thank you so much.
All right, there we go.
Greetings from Copenhagen.
All right. How's everybody doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. I'm hanging out at the Standard with you guys. No, I'm not getting any audio. Oh, yeah, he's our friend, isn't he?
So I explained to everyone that the main event is going on in Paris at the moment. So you're there with Herbie Hancock and Terry Lynn and a lot of other people, right?
Yes, so the main event, yes, happening. I'm here in Paris. Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, Terry Lynn, Carrington, Al Jarreau. There's Avishai Cohen is playing trumpet, all sorts of fantastic musicians. And we're doing it at UNESCO headquarters, which is very cool. UNESCO being the goodwill arm of the United Nations. So it's a pretty cool and appropriate spot to have the big concert. But congratulations on you guys for celebrating Jazz Day there. It's very cool to see you guys playing. I heard the song that you just finished, which sounded fantastic. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus. Do you know anything about the UNESCO's motivation for doing this International Jazz Day?
The original idea was Herbie Hancock's idea, but the idea is that jazz is a fantastic model for communication between cultures, for communication between countries. It's a really democratic music, and it's a really great example for how we can communicate as societies. And communication is, of course, the first step towards peaceful coexistence. So jazz is the model, and that's the idea behind Jazz Day. Every country in the world now is celebrating jazz. This is the fourth annual concert. The first one was in New York and New Orleans. Second one took place in Istanbul, Turkey. Third one was in Osaka, Japan. And this one is here in Paris. But everyone all around the world, in countries where they're really dealing with a lot of strife and a lot of turmoil, they still are taking time to celebrate jazz, which I think is an incredible thing.
Yes, jazz has against all odds, somehow become completely international over the years.
Yes.
There's hardly, as you say, there's hardly a country in the world that doesn't embrace jazz, and it's pretty remarkable.
Yes, yes. It's also really well-balanced music, in my opinion, because as you guys just demonstrated, you have to learn to operate as a group. It's very important to have a unified sound and to combine all these personalities into one whole. But at the same time, everyone gets an opportunity to express themselves individually, which is fantastic. But at the same time, you have people with these to tell you who they are as individuals. And I don't think there's a lot of styles of music or art forms that do both as well as jazz.
That's right. Thank you so much, Marcus. So we've been debating these exact topics today, and they're also the subject of my new book, Improvisation, where my vision is to introduce organizations of all kinds, to the idea of they can be operated on the basis of jazz principles. So I'm very happy to hear what you had to say, because it totally echoes what we've been discussing here the past couple of hours. So I know you have a busy schedule with rehearsals and preparing for tonight's concert, so we look forward to watching you online. And we thank you so much for joining us, Marcus. It's a big honor and pleasure for us to see you and have you with us. Thank you so much.
Hey, it's my pleasure. You guys continue on. Yeah.
Sure. All right. Thank you, everyone. So that concludes our presentation today. So thank you for joining us. It's been a great pleasure. And thank you for the opportunity to sharing some of these views with you. We hope you will have successful improvisations in the days, months, and years to come. Thank you very much.